2 years ago, I introduced myself in Paris by saying that I was the man who had accompanied Mrs. Kennedy to Paris. I'm getting somewhat that same sensation as I travel around Texas.
Here is a special bulletin from Dallas, Texas.
President Kennedy and Texas Governor John Connally shot from ambush.
He's been shot. He's been shot. Lee Oswald has been shot.
In a curious paradox that has since been corrected, it was a federal crime in 1963, just as it is today, to threaten to kill the President of the United States. But it was not a federal crime to actually carry out the threat. The murder of President Kennedy was a state crime, just like any other homicide. And just as it is in nearly every jurisdiction in the country, once the local police department filed a charge of murder against Lee Harvey Oswald, he became a prisoner of the county.
Anytime you file on a prisoner, they then become the property of the county, and they're supposed to take care of him, feed him, and all everything while he's incarcerated. That's the law, state law.
You had a pack of 400 or 500 reporters, all demanding to see Oswald, demanding to talk to Oswald, demanding to have a press conference. During his arrest, Oswald got a little cut over the eye, if you remember. And that was flashed on nationwide television the night before. He handcuffed, no, I didn't kill anybody. And it may have been Eric Severide from CBS or some of the commentators that began commenting about the prisoner and his appearance. And so I think the city fathers prevailed upon Chief Jess Curry, good guy, and Curry made a decision. And he decided, instead of using common sense and transferring Oswald and the decoy method, they'd do a photo op.
And so it was that on Sunday morning, the basement of Dallas City Hall was filled with reporters, and a happenstance opportunity was created for Dallas nightclub owner Jack Ruby.
He came down to send a moneygram over to one of his girls in Fort Worth to pay on her rent. He walked out of the Western Union and saw that the man standing at the ramp leading down into the basement, and he decided to walk up there, he said, and look down and see if he could see what's going on. He said, I knew they wouldn't let me in, but he said, just as I walked up to the ramp, a marked police car come out, driven by Lieutenant Pierce, and he had a sergeant in the car with him. The one officer that was guarding that ramp walked out in the street about 10 or 12 steps out there to hold up traffic so that Lieutenant Pierce could make a left turn on Main Street and go around the building to get in front of the armored motor vehicle. When that officer turned his back and couldn't see him, he darted behind that car that the lieutenant was driving and walked down the ramp and mixed with the news people down there and worked his way to the front, is what he told me.
It so happened that Dallas Times-Herald photographer Bob Jackson drew the assignment to cover the transfer at Dallas City Hall.
Bob Finley was the reporter assigned to this, and he and I had actually had a dual assignment. That morning we were to cover the Oswald transfer, and then we were to go to the Parkland Hospital where Governor Connally's wife was giving a press conference.
Dallas homicide detective Jim Lavelle was in charge of the transfer.
When we started out with him, he wanted to put on that black sweater, and I let him put that on, and then I put a set of handcuffs on his wrist like this, and then I put my cuffs on from his right arm to my left. And I told him, I said, Lee, if anybody shoots at you, I hope they're as good a shot as you are, meaning, of course, they'd hit him and not me. And he kind of laughed, and he said, oh, nobody's going to shoot at me.
As Lavelle escorted Oswald on Oswald's right, the media was waiting. But Bob Jackson was seeing the world through the narrow confines of his camera viewfinder.
I get in position. I pre-focused my camera on about 10 feet, and I must have checked to make sure I'd wound it. I checked everything, my strobe.
And then the unthinkable happened in Dallas for a second time in as many days.
He's coming out. All of a sudden I'm aware of somebody stepping out real fast from my right, we'd be fired, and I fired. I mean, it just came together. I couldn't have planned it any better. In fact, if I'd have planned it, it probably wouldn't have worked.
Bob Jackson tripped the shutter of his Nikon S3 camera and in an instant made history. Murder on live TV, a still image capturing the very instant for all time. So it was on those 3 days in Dallas a half-century ago. 3 Days in Dallas is underwritten by Christian Brothers Automotive and is a production of News Talk 600 KTBB and KTBB.com. I'm Paul Gleiser.